relocating us.
Yeah, they were. Youth and Native Ministries.
That's right.
Always, away from the other offices.
West Wing. We're in the West Wing.
So, so we brought teams here several times, but I want you to understand the heart, so that when we're going to Cayenta, where a lot has changed, for them in the last 2 years, and just so you grasp and understand what is happening and culturally what's happening and all those things. So, Pastor Jack.
Yep. Well, hey guys, good to have all of you here. How do you like the weather in Flagstaff? Okay, well, I don't have to be sweating all day today. Yeah, but hey, it's so good to see all of you. Jamie, Sean, your leadership, board. I don't know if there are any board members on here from the church, but thanks for coming and connecting. I think for me it's always huge to be, and Mr. Missions guy. Yeah, but anyway, I think for me it's always such a privilege and an honor to partner. That's what the kingdom of God should look like, right? Is us partnering together. When we get to heaven, sorry to disappoint you, but I don't think there's going to be like a white reservation, a black reservation, a native reservation. I think we're going to be mixed, and we're going to be all at the throne of our Master, our Lord, and casting our crowns, right? And so that's the heart. I think when we went to Omaha, I walked into Omaha, Nebraska, the church that had brought us on, Pastor Dobie Weasel. Most of you probably know him. He's my mentor. He kind of poured into me when I kind of didn't know what I was doing, don't know where I was going. I know God had called me to Bible college, and over 30 years ago, I met him, and we walked up in the back of the school. There's a little hill. People call them mountains, but you know how the Midwest people, they call like little hills mountains. And then you come out to the Colorados and the Rockies, and there are mountains. And so anyway, so we're coming down that mountain after he talked to me. He just talked to me. He says, where are you going? What are you doing? Every conversation that a dad and a son should have. We had that conversation, and coming down, I just in my spirit saw a vision of maybe Isaac and Abraham coming off Mount Moriah, and just that connection, right? So that's been kind of our track for the last since we got to ministry, full-time ministry. We've been in full-time ministry close to 30 years. I can't believe I'm saying that. It feels so old. And Sydney was like 18 when she first came. The first time she came, and now my son Caleb, our youngest, is 18 years old. And so, and I think we've been here 18 years this year. So in 2007, we moved back. We've left the church in Omaha. And part of our story is I always tell people, when teams come and when we start getting to know each other, and me tell my story, and some of you heard my story when I was there in March. They always say, I didn't know, we didn't know. I mean, some of the stuff I'm going to tell you, you're probably going to say, not here, not in America. But it does happen, and it is happening. The Navajo Nation is a little bit bigger than West Virginia, and on the entire Navajo Nation, there are only 13 grocery stores. Imagine that, 13 grocery stores on the entire. You probably drive past 13 grocery stores to go to church on Sundays, right? And the medical centers, full blown, probably 5 medical centers. Not all of them have overnight patients that come in and stay, just the severe cases. Most of the time they air vac them to either Flagstaff, Phoenix, or some of the bigger communities. So the reservation is like I said, a huge reservation. So your neighbor's right here, and you drive 5 miles, there's nobody, and then you see like a house or a single white trailer out in the middle of nowhere. You can't own land on the reservation as the Navajo Nation membership because the land ultimately belongs to the government. So it's called land trusts. And that's why when you're driving across the reservation, you'll see some, scenarios, situations. You're like, man, these guys don't have a whole lot of pride in themselves to clean up their yard. So, if it's not yours, right? I mean, obviously, that's something that the ownership is not really there. And so that's kind of why it's that way. The government has given certain recognition to tribes throughout the United States, and there are over 600, and I believe it's something like 630 tribes in the United States, of which 321 of them are recognized by the federal government. And so the Navajo Nation is the largest people group and the largest landmass as well. So it takes about a day to drive across the entire reservation from here to New Mexico, pretty much. And is the team that drove the two individuals, are they here? Are they here yet?
No.
No, they're not here yet. So they're probably driving across from like Albuquerque coming this way. And so anyway, I just wanted to kind of share that with you. You're gonna feel like you're going back in time. You're gonna feel like, wow, I can't believe these things happen. One of the things that's the biggest challenge is just the lack of just basic essentials. 40% of the people of the Navajo Nation don't have running water. About probably the same amount don't have electricity. So a lot of them are like really, really rural areas. I mean, they're like in Timbuktu, just in nowhere. People live there. And people, I think Jamie asked me this during the podcast that we did when we were there a couple months back. He says, why can't people just leave, right? And it's not as simple as that, because the people are tied to the land. And when you're tied to the land, it belonged to your grandfather, great-grandfather, great-great-grandfather. So I don't know, you remember the story in the book of Genesis where Jacob, when Joseph relocated the entire nation to Egypt, and his dad, Joseph, said, hey, when you leave, take my bones, take it back to Canaan. And there was a reason why he said that, because there was ties to the land. And so the native people, for the most part, their fight, their plight, their struggle has always been the land. Land has been a big part of, that's why, land are sacred, just different places are sacred and to them. And for the most part, a lot of the native people in the United States of America, if you just talk to them, strip everything back, it's always, the ultimate goal is to walk in harmony with nature, to walk in beauty. The Navajo people say it that way, walk in beauty, or that's the ultimate goal. And of course, you and I both know sin ruined all that, right? And I think that's every man's desire on planet Earth is to have internal peace, to have a peace that's beyond this life and on this earth. I think Romans chapter, whatever chapter it was, that always talks about 12, I think it is, where it says that if it's all possible, live at peace with everyone. And I think living at peace with everyone starts with you. And so if you don't have peace in your life, in your heart, in Christ, oftentimes that peace is absent. You're searching for it. So the native people, that's the utopia. That's the the ultimate chief of life on this planet, is to walk in harmony. And a lot of times with the Navajo culture, the way we were brought up, the things that we were taught, a lot of taboos. Our culture is built on fear. Fear that's supposed to, in a sense, keep you between the guardrails of life. And so there are boundaries, and everything's spiritual. Everything is a messenger. You get up in the middle of the night, growing up in a hogan, which is like an octagon dwelling, a mud house, so to speak, and third floor, you walk out the door, that's your classroom. So the native people are like Eastern people, where they think holistically. We don't think compartments. We don't think like kitchen, bedroom, restroom. It's not put in different compartments. It's whole. So that's their dwelling represents that. Their life represents that. That whole idea and thought. And so I grew up in a home like that growing up. And my first experience, you've heard my story, is boarding school experience. A lot of challenges. I never really understood a lot of things that happened to me. When you were really small, 6, 7 years old, put in boarding school and your family drives away, you're basically in a survival mode. It's basically, how do I see the end of the day? How do I see next week? How do I, at least see my family again down the road? And so that was my experience. And if you heard my story, my first experience at boarding school is they, cut my hair off. shave my hair off. That's the first thing they did to me. And for the life of me, I don't understand why that happened. I mean, obviously there's explanation, and they tell us stories and say, well, that's for, you know, hygiene purposes, and in case you came to school and you had, you know, different things on you, we you know, sanitize you basically, cleaned you, and so everything was so sanitized. You walk into a building and it smelled like soap, it smelled like, you know, cleaning. You know, like pine sol was like the main thing that you smell, and there was a fluorescent light over us. I remember even to this day, here, almost in my mind, sensing I heard it, you know, buzzing and, you know, just humming, and that was the beginning of my introduction to the dominant society. And for us to learn the English language, they had us watch movies, and a lot of times the movies we watch were cowboys and Indian movies. And you sit there thinking to yourself, why are we always the villain? Why are we always standing at a trading post and don't know how to talk? All we say is how, and grunt a little bit, and then we're the villain. We don't know how to fight. We always get beat by John Wayne, you know, that type of thing, right? So there's a lot of conflicting and mixed, almost messages coming at you, and you're trying to find yourself in that. And I think that's really a breeding grounds for frustration, anger, low self-esteem, all that stuff compiled upon each other. It becomes a means where you start medicating. So the Native people, for the most part, a lot of them is substance abuse is huge. There's a lot of, I think the statistic tells us that teenage suicide among the Native population is 3 times the national average. So there's like a lot of hopelessness. There's a lot of just dysfunction upon dysfunction, and I mean, just if you really dig into it. And to me, I think from my place and position as a pastor, as an educator, as a person that cares about his community and his people, I you know, just kind of process it in my mind, and I think to myself, you know, like our culture, our way of life really works against us, because some of the things that we've learned is like little kids when they're small, the first word they learn is the word fear. And that word in the Navajo language is ye, or ye yup. You know, they say that. And when they say ye, that means shrink back, withhold, stop in your tracks. You know, and then they'll use a term like maybe in your world, ye boogeyman, right? In our world, it'll be like ye skinwalker or ye nalkloshi. That's what they'll say. And it's like, oh, and then it grips you with fear. And you're like, now, okay, what do I do? Where do I go? Right? So that's kind of the world we live in. That's the world we live in. That's the world. And so for me, growing up in my story, boarding school had a lot of rules, a lot of regulations, and a lot of do's and don'ts. One of the things that happened was every 4 hours there was a roll call, because there was potential for any given student running away, going AWOL, right, jumping the fence, and, you know, go down a ravine and take off, you know, and get away from that place. There was a lot of physical abuse. There was a lot of verbal abuse. Military style run school where you had to make your bed certain ways, and you know, single file everywhere. Everybody had their hair cut. You know, we always joke about some of our haircut. Some of the naughty ones, they let their hair grow out a little longer on one side so they can grab them with their hair, you know. So they let it grow like a little bit on the front, like a horn, one horn. And so, you know, we laugh about that years later, right? But that was reality. That was no joke. And so every morning you got up at a certain time. You were thrown out of bed and you had to do your run, your calisthenics in the morning. Everybody had to do that. Everybody sat down by alphabetical order. And so they would take a roll call and everyone had to acknowledge that they were there, here or present, and on down the line. And if there was someone that was missing, everything was put on hold. There were privileges to, like different things like activities that they did. For us, they would just put it on hold until, you know, it was really, I don't know, I think to me it was kind of like a brainwashing. A lot of that happened. We're told a lot of things that our culture, our language was not going to advance our people. And so we were told not to speak our language, We're told not to, like some of the natives that went to boarding school in the Midwest and back east, Carlisle, Pennsylvania was one of the largest Indian boarding school where kids were taken from the Dakotas and from the Crow Nation and from, Oregon and different places like that. Their hairs were cut and they were told that what they believed in was, demonic and devilish. And so there's always the ceremonial, the cultural, the custom, and then, when you come to Christ, when you become a believer, what does that look like? Where do you start? How do you process a lot of these things? And so there's a lot of those questions that come with it. And so for me, it was just my mom that raised me. She was actually an older aunt who, hey, by the way, this is Pastor Lynette Husen, and she's my assistant here. And so anyway, I was going to say part of the lost my train of thought. What was I talking about? Part of the
Coming to Christ.
Coming to Christ. My older aunt adopted me, and my mom, my biological mother, she had my older brother and myself with obviously my biological father, who was married to another aunt. And so my grandma stepped in and said that enough is enough. And so the Navajo way of life back then, they did arrangement. And you just pray and hope that your mom and dad had good taste, and you'll be married to someone that wasn't too attractive. And so anyway, so that's how they did. They did arrangements. And so my grandma said, you're gonna marry my dad's younger brother, who had just come home from Vietnam. And he had, all of the above. He saw combat, and he had, every challenges that come with that type of environment. And when he came back, he started drinking heavily and started abusing my biological mother physically. And she didn't want me to experience that or see that or to be in harm's way, so she gave me up for adoption. So my older Aunt Dalma, she had a crisis in her life. Her husband had just died. He was working on the railroads in California, and there was some flooding that was going on, and they sent back 5 guys to fix a certain part of the tracks, and there was flash floodings, and after 4 of them drowned, and 1 survived, and he was one of them. And so she was searching and looking and in pain, and came to know Christ, and she became a believer. As a matter of fact, she went to IBC, Indian Bible College, right up the road here, about 5 blocks from our church on North Main. The college is still there, and she took a 2-year Bible training, and just became a strong believer. She was blessed to have a vehicle, an automobile, so she would drive back to the reservation. And if you had an automobile back then, everybody looked to you, you had a lot of influence. If something happened in the family, instead of sending someone by horseback or wagon, they would summon you to go get the medicine man. And you were kind of the Uber, before Uber was Uber. And so you were Ubering the medicine man home for the people that were in need of ceremony. So that is what she became. But just then there were some missionaries that came into our community, a Christian Missionary Alliance Church. And Mr. and Mrs. Hurt from, I don't know where they were from, I think from New York or something like that, because I know Missionary Alliance was strong back east, up in the New York area. That was kind of their beginnings. And so anyway, they started reaching out to our family. And our pastor came into the community in the early 70s. And this is when I was still small. And my aunt mom that adopted me started going to that church. And our pastor would come and he would tell stories. And the stories he told were just incredible stories. All the Bible stories and some. He had a native perspective because he was Navajo. He didn't really speak Navajo when he first came because he himself, it's kind of weird because he really couldn't speak English when he left Chin Lee, ended up in Phoenix, and decided to run away. He was working on a farm. All the Navajo young men were being sent to the valley because there were tons of farms in Phoenix area. Now it's nothing but concrete and highways and buildings, but in the Glendale area there were farms. And so he shows up with some of his buddies. They work all day. They go to the mess hall and they sat down, and here comes these African nationals from Africa. They were also working on the farm. So his buddies teased him and said, hey, a year from now we're going to look like those guys. Freaked him out. And so he decides to go home back to the reservation. And so the guy explains to him, this is what you do. You get from Phoenix, get to the bus depot, go to Flagstaff, they Gallup, and then Gallup hitchhike back to Chinle. And so he rolls out a map and he says, this is Arizona. And then he rolls out another map and says, this is the United States. The United States is like taking a cowhide and throwing it over a fence. The backbone is the Canadian border, and then the Gulf of Mexico is like the hind leg. The Florida Peninsula is like the front leg. And so he decides before getting back to the reservation, he's going to walk the cowhide all the way around. So instead of going home, no English, takes off towards California. And long story short, ends up in Minnesota. He's on the side of the road, dejected, don't know what to do, starving. A nice family pulled up next to him, takes him in, ministers to him, comes to faith, educates him, teaches him how to read and write, and years later becomes the Bible college president. And he comes back into our community. And we called him the man from the cowhide land. That was his name. And an incredible story. And so he would tell us these stories, right? So he has these stories, just stories after stories after stories. So he talks about the Good Samaritan. He says, in the Good Samaritan, who's the hero of the Good Samaritan? Who are the characters? Well, there's the Levite, there's the priest, there's the man that fell among the robbers, and he was left on the side of the road half dead. And then he says, in these stories, he says, you see our world. This is our world. He says, the Good Samaritan, the outsider, came to help this man that was dying on the side of the road. And here comes the government, represented by the Levite. Here comes the church, represented by the priests. And instead of helping, they did not help. So in essence, they left him to die. The guy that fell among the robbers and stripped, half naked and dying, that's our story. That's our people. That's what happened to us. So he would tell stories like that, right? And you're listening to these stories from different angles. And it makes sense. It hits home. And for me, as I started growing up, I became very bitter, very angry, very resentful, hated the government, hated the boarding school, hated not being able to speak my language, hated everything about life, hated myself. Went to watch a movie at the Chapter House, the story of the Chief Joseph movie. And you've heard me tell the story about how Chief Joseph, the movie starts out with this eagle flying overhead and swoops down, sits on a jackrabbit and picks it up, and there's a native guy under the brushes, grabs the bird, plucks the feather, releases the bird, and my heart leaps. I said, that's us. That's the right depiction of our people. That's how we live. That was us warriors, all of us, right? I mean, some of us have like Bruce Lee in us, right? Growing up, we think we're Bruce Lee. Others, I don't know who your hero was. Maybe Karate Kid or.
Hopefully not John Wayne, huh?
I'm sorry?
So hopefully not John Wayne.
Yeah. Maybe your hero was John Wayne. We have a song about John Wayne too. So anyway, I might share with you guys at the end of our mission time together. But for me, I watched that movie, and Chief Joseph is being told to go to a reservation, and he's eluding the government. They're trying to hunt him down. They're trying to capture him. And so him and a few elderly people and children, they were just moving from place to place, outsmarting the bluecoats. And so he makes a run for Canada because he hears that Chief's Sitting Bull's in Canada. So as he's making his run, he gets caught. Happens to be Pastor Dobie's tribe, the Assiniboine Sioux, that betrays Chief Joseph and gives him up to be captured. And so on Bear Paw Mountain, he gives the famous speech about how so-and-so's dead, the young men that make decisions, I don't know where they are. You know, he says, you know, at the end of that speech that, you know, I don't know where my children are. He says they have no blankets, they have no food, they have no water. I must go look for them. I might find them among the dead, he says. And he says, with those words, from where the sun now stands, you know, my heart is sad, my heart is sick. I think about Jesus on the cross, right? Scholars and theologians tell us that Jesus didn't die from the beating. He died from a broken heart over you, over me, right? Over humanity, over the depravity of mankind. And I think Chief Joseph, his heart was so broken that he says, my heart is, from where the sun now stands, I will fight no more forever. I give up, basically, he says. Takes his blanket, puts over himself, turns around, credit rolls, and sit there, stunned. Thinking to myself, wow, he lost, I lost. And I said, if there is a God in the universe, when he made me, he made a mistake. When he made me, because he made me Indian. We always lose, we never win, and we might as well go turn to alcohol, drugs, to medicate, to numb ourselves. And that's in reality what happens to a lot of our people. There's a lot of bondage, there's a lot of addiction. And so I walk out of that place an angry person. I was ready to go join AIM, American Indian Movement. They were really big at the time. They were making music, they were becoming a kind of, you know, putting themselves on the map, and they were disturbing the point of everybody's view, and they were, you know, taking over government buildings, you know, the siege at Wounded Knee with Russell Bean and Dennis Banks and a guy named Leonard Peltier. He's still in prison. They accuse him of killing two government agents. So those type of things started happening. There was unrest. So the Native people were being suppressed, and all of that, I come to this church, and Pastor Herman is preaching faithfully. One time I came at Sunday night, and our pastor was wearing his big shades. I said, why is he wearing big shades? After a while, he takes his shades off. He was all beat up. He had taken the gospel to the Paiute community, in our community, and they jumped him and they beat him up for preaching the gospel. So I saw that, and I thought to myself, wow, this is crazy. This person's got so much passion to spread the good news, to live for God, and became my hero, you know, as I listened to him and as I learned from him, as he poured into our life. And long story short, we were sheep herding one evening on the foothills of Navajo Mountain. I was standing on the top of a boulder, and the sun had just dipped behind the mountain. It was ready to take the animals back to the corral. As I stood there, I hear just these words, as you know, the constellation starts to appear before my eyes, the stars, the planets. I'm looking up, and this is what I hear. I hear, where there's creation, there's a creator. Where there's a design, there's a designer. I made you. You were not a mistake. You were not a loser. I made you. That, for me, changed everything. From that day on to this day, I gave my life to Jesus. Probably in the next couple of weeks down the road, got baptized in that church. And I wish I could tell you, my experience was I saw heavens open and angels ascending, descending. But what happened was the peace of God filled my heart. And to this day, that peace guides me and leads me. Everything I do, all that I am, I depend on the peace of God. And today, I serve Him. I do what I can. This morning, Lenora, we're having a conversation, and you know, I said, "Wow, another team coming." So she made some other comments and said to me, "Well, you're just getting old, you know. I'm feeling it. I'm beginning to feel it." And so, yeah, it happens. And as we get older, I think it gets sweeter. It gets deeper. God's grace is revealed to you in a greater measure. Everything begins to unfold. Some of you are young. Hopefully, this trip impacts you. Hopefully, this trip will open your eyes that yes, This is the United States of America. We're not in a developing country somewhere. People ask me all the time, what do you think about the government? What do you think about, the Democrats, the Republicans, and, all these different parties? And I tell them, you know what, if there's no running water in my mom's house in 2024, I kind of don't care who's in charge.
Amen.
And I say to myself, we send millions and trillions of dollars elsewhere. And we got people right here in the United States that are without. When your problem is a Wi-Fi connection, you have no Wi-Fi. Their problem is rationing gas so they can eat at the end of the week and have water to drink. When your problem is, whatever else that your problems are, their problem is going in the middle of dead winter to an outhouse because they have no flush toilets. That's their problem. That's their hardship. That's their struggle. And so I hope you learned something this week. I hope you are challenged. I hope you see things. People always say, what are the do's and don'ts? Well, I just tell them the do's is simply this: just be Jesus to people. Be who you are. Don't come in knowing everything about everything and having the answers. Sometimes those hills are not worth dying on, right? Sometimes it's just us. The least that you have done unto, Jesus says, you have done unto me. When did we give you water? When did we feed you? When did we clothe you? When did we visited you? Well, Jesus says, when you've done it unto the least. So there are a lot of least out there, okay, that otherwise will not have what they have. Because God had sent you, and God had ordained this trip. These next couple, it's going to open and close real fast, or it'll be gone. And so I hope you enjoy yourself. If you have any question, I'll be around. Here, Pastor Lynette is my assistant. There, I have another assistant there in Kayenta. So we're about 143 miles from the community that we'll be in Kayenta. And so tomorrow's going to be a long day. We have a guy named Dave Watson coming up from Phoenix. He's going to put us to work. And we're working with WorldServe International, which is an organization that drills water in Africa for something like 4 or 5 million people. And they want to bring that to the Navajo Nation. And 2024, 2025, they want to do 10 wells. But it's not just that simple. There's a lot of things to jump over, red tape, stuff like that. EPAs, there are open uranium mines that are active on the reservation. And there are over 500 of them that's not been properly closed. And so it takes between $5 to $15 million for one mine to be shut down properly. And so those are the challenges that this people group will live with every single day. Contamination and things like that. And so this is a challenge. And so please be open in your mind. Let God speak to you as you are on the reservation. Okay? Any questions?
I mean, kind of along those lines, that's a lot of the negative information, like the reality of it. When you're praying for these groups that are coming in, what's something that you're praying or proud of or excited for us to see or witness?
As teams come in, did you say?
Yep.
What am I? The people on the Navajo Nation, by and large, for the most part, they're very genuine. They're very authentic. They're very receptive. So they tell us across the board, states in Canada, over 7 million Native people, less than 3% claims to be Christians, less than 3. But with the Navajo Nation and the Apache Nation, it's way higher than that. It's probably closer to 30% maybe. So there are a lot of believers, but the challenge with that for me is always local church and discipleship. Sometimes those things don't take place, so there's a lot of kind of independent people out there running around. But I guess the positive is there are very genuine people. There are people, if you show them enough time, the longevity or the sustainability of relationship that they create, they will be loyal. I mean, if there's one Navajo that's a Ford fan, he's a Ford fan until he goes to the grave. That's what I know about Native people. We don't jump ship they're not all over the place. They've kind of seen everything that that has come and that will come. Kind of like what Solomon says, there's nothing new under the sun, right? So a lot of times the Native people, they're kind of, their perception, their worldview is from that place. It's that, you know what, nothing's really changed, you know, in all these years. You know, they sign papers, they say this, they make all these promises, but here we are, we're still in the same deal, you know. So I think that's, I think the positive side is when a Native family comes to faith, they come to faith. They literally abandon their old beliefs. It's very black and white for especially Southwest Natives. Now, if you go to the plains and you know, some of the tribes back east, a little bit different, because they in their social life see the different like feathers and teepees, and because that's their home, that's their dwelling. Here in the Navajo, when they see feathers and teepees, to them, we got saved from that, you know, because to them that's ceremonial. Because it's very complex, their belief system, you know, because there's the mythology, there's the emergent stories, there are a lot of different things that they try to see holistically, everything, and so when they come to faith, and they stick with it. They are people that, I know they go through trials, hardships and tribulations, but they really commit themselves, you know, to be faithful to God. And so a lot of it's just, you know, just teaching. And I think the positive thing too is that the younger people are rising up too, and they're getting more educated. There are a lot of, like, I have a sister-in-law who's a doctor, she's a veterinarian. She has her own clinic on the reservation. And so you see a lot of that too. There's a lot of those that are in the education system, they're going somewhere. My son Matthew, he's down in Phoenix. He's receiving his master's degree from Wheaton College in the fall, and pursue his you know, doctorate degree. And I, in my mind, see him as he says, I want to stay in higher education, maybe be a president of a college somewhere down the road. You know, so he's very committed to that. And so his passion is to see Native students go to a higher education and not only last 1 or 2 semesters, because that's what statistic tells us. He wants to see them go in as a freshman and graduate as a senior. You know, so that's his passion. So he really pushes that. So we have a lot of those positive, encouraging highlights. So I don't know if I have any other example, but I'll think of it as I drive down the road.
No, thank you.
Yeah, appreciate it. Any other questions, guys? We were really hit with the pandemic hard. And I mean, it was for a long time, even after the pandemic was over. They were wearing masks, they were requiring masks. I think the Hopi Nation are still doing that. Is that, like, if you go to their side of the, like, businesses, gas stations and things like that, you know, you have to have masks on. Because a lot of their elders, a lot of the, obviously that's kind of the underlying health issues, right, that were exposed, or even they were hit the most. Type 2 diabetes, type 2 is the leading, maybe third, I think it's third or fourth leading cause of death among the Native people. Prior to the government, Natives were out hunting for their food. I mean, they were just moving with the gains, but then when the government relegated them onto reservations, then they became subjects of the government, where they provided food, and the food that was provided were not really the best. I mean, it wasn't like banana bread. I mean, it was lard, and it was, you know, those type of food. And so that really hit our people in a negative way. And so that's kind of some of the challenges too. So some of the highlights is just there's a, you know, they're very passionate about their sports. I mean, like, if you go to Netflix, what's the name of that? Basketball or Nothing? Is that what it's called? All or Basketball or Nothing, I think.
Yeah, the one about
Yeah, the Chinle. The Chinle, yeah. So if you go to the Navajo Nation and go to some of their high schools, their basketball, the gymnasium are not like gyms, they're like arenas. So it seats like 4,000 to 5,000 people. And so, yeah, it's crazy. You go down to Phoenix and all these top teams are playing in the state, and if it's the Valley schools, there's only a few people there, maybe 200-300. And but the natives still make it to state. They have like 20,000 plus native people, you know, packing up those arenas down there. And so it's real funny. They're very passionate. So if you go out in the middle of nowhere, you'll see three things for sure. You'll see an outhouse, a satellite dish, and a basketball goal. Okay? So that's a typical reservation home. They're passionate about that. So cool. Any other questions, guys? I think we're kind of pressed for time. Is that the deal?
Yeah.
I keep seeing people. Because we gotta buy stuff, right? Some things for material for your food so you guys can eat. One joke. Can I do one joke? What do you call a dog wagging its tail on the reservation?